Welcome to the Specialty in-Basket Needs Project Phase 4 training video. In this phase, we will guide you on how to check on the implementation and sustainment of your interventions. So let's get started. As always, we encourage you to watch this video with your team and have the Phase 4 workbook on hand to follow along. If you don't have it with you, you can find the workbook in the Phase 4 folder inbox. Please close any unnecessary applications on your laptop and silence your phone to refrain from distractions. There will be discussions and working sessions with your team throughout the video, so feel free to pause the training video as needed. This video will recap what we covered in the Phase 3 training video, and then we will jump into the last of the project cycle, which is checking in on the implementation and sustainment plan. From there, we will conclude with next steps. As you are aware, there are 4 phases in the SPIN project as shown here. Let's do a quick recap on what your team accomplished in Phase 3. By now, you and your project team should have completed putting together an action plan that addresses the root causes. You also developed standard work and put together an implementation plan that covers how you will communicate the new interventions, how you will measure its success, and how you will train your frontline team before going live. And lastly, you and your team have gone live with launching your interventions. As always, please ensure that you and your team have completed all the checklist items for Phase 3 before moving on to Phase 4. The purpose of Phase 4 is to have the team actively track the implementation of the future state and make the needed adjustments and improvements to the process design based on the performance of the new workflow. The team will continue to leverage qualitative and quantitative feedback to ensure ongoing success. Let's get into the steps for Phase 4. Phase 4 consists of 2 main steps. They are checking on the progress of the implementation work and preparing and completing the 30-day Plan, Do, Check, Adjust. In Step 15, you and your team will check that people are testing the new workflows, obtaining feedback from those testing out the new workflows, and track data to measure any improvements. Let's get into more detail about how to complete this step. You cannot know if the changes you have made will lead to improvement until you are sure that the changes are occurring as designed. Observations are essential to ensure that the new workflow is happening and being completed correctly. It is often helpful if the observations are completed by your team and key project stakeholders. Similarly to how the current state process walks were set up, assign a team member to help coordinate and set up the observations. As a reminder, the observation setup includes sending out the calendar invites, sending observation tools including standard work or observation checklists to the observers, and lastly, tracking observations in the observation tracker. So what is an observation checklist, and how do you create one? An observation checklist includes the process steps of standard work, the key steps observers should be looking for, and a grid to check off if the process step was completed or followed. Creating an observation checklist is straightforward. Using the new standard work that you created, plug in the process steps from the description column. This can be done in 2 easy steps. Step 1. Plug in the high-level process steps from the What column of your standard work into the second column of the checklist template. Step 2. Plug in the significant descriptive steps from the How column into the third column of the checklist template. Be sure that the descriptive steps has its own row so that the observer can check off if that step was performed. This observation checklist template allows for 3 separate observations, and a comment field is provided for feedback and recommendations. We highly recommend watching one team member complete a few cycles of standard work and ensuring that multiple team members are observed by the group. This gives the most accurate assessment of how consistently the new standard work is being implemented. Let's discuss feedback collection next. Why do we solicit feedback? It's really important to get first-hand information from the people testing the new work to understand if the new process is working and delivering results so that we can adjust them and improve. It is also a way to demonstrate our respect for people by listening to them, logging and closing the loop on each feedback they provide. In order to collect detailed and timely feedback, a feedback system needs to be implemented, and someone should be responsible for collecting and logging the feedback. It is critical that every piece of feedback is logged so everyone's voice is heard and considered when deciding if there should be any changes to the project or standard work. Even if every change is suggested, not ultimately implemented, the process of responding to feedback demonstrates respect and builds trust with the team. There are many ways to collect feedback. You can collect feedback by putting together feedback flip charts where staff can use Post-its to write their feedback. You can also collect feedback through conversations you may have with the staff and other team members doing the work. It can also be from staff meetings, emails, surveys, and even staff messages in Epic. So from all the different ways you can collect feedback, you now need to bring all the feedback together and log it somewhere. Here is a screenshot of the feedback collection tool, which you will have access to. The feedback collection tracker prompts the person overseeing the feedback collection to track the date of the feedback that was received, who submitted the feedback, was the feedback submitted on behalf of someone else, was the feedback provided at a certain project event, what specific area is the feedback pertaining to, the actual feedback that was submitted, log the response of the feedback, the why behind the decision that the team wants to communicate back to the broader team or to the individual who gave the feedback. It is particularly helpful when the suggestion was considered, but ultimately the team decided not to change the standard work. The status of the feedback, and where the feedback will or was reviewed. When you obtain feedback for a project, it is important to know how to categorize the feedback. You should ask yourself, is this a feedback on the process or how it's being implemented? For instance, if someone submits feedback of, people are not following the new workflow, then the feedback is speaking more about the how. Feedback that discusses the how should be discussed with leadership or the design team operational meetings and do not need to go to the 30-day check meeting. It is also important we don't collect theoretical concerns from people who haven't tried the process, but from those who have done so. Let's now move into the last step, which is preparing and completing a 30-day plan, do, check, adjust. In this step, the team will prepare and present qualitative and quantitative feedback to reflect on tested changes. The 30-day check allows us to adjust and improve the process designed based on the performance of the new workflows, so that the improvements can be sustained over time. It is also another point in the project to show your team that their feedback matters and considered even if we don't make all the changes that they request. So not only does a 30-day check improve the work, but it also shows your team that you are with them for this journey and that you won't move on until you have considered their feedback. So why do a check at 30 days? That's because it has been shown that it takes 30 days to build new habits. It takes time to adjust to any change, even a good one. So waiting for 30 days before making changes to standard work gives people time to adjust and then consider what changes to make. Making changes quickly can often cause confusion for the team. With that said, the 30-day check is not set in stone. Teams can adjust the timing of the check to be sooner or spread out based on the implementation and the needs of the project. Also, issues of patient or team safety should be addressed immediately. Be sure to discuss it with your leader on what would be the best cadence for your particular project. Overall, it is critical that you have an effective 30-day check. Let's go through the details and how to prepare for these meetings. Here is a sample of a 30-day check agenda. This agenda structure allows the meeting participants to go over quantitative and qualitative feedback, have an opportunity to discuss any reflections or learnings, make any adjustments to the designed improvement, create a new implementation plan based on the adjustments, and then create a training plan and observation plan. And finally, summarize the next steps and adjourn. Be sure to plan the agenda with your leader and feel free to make use of this template to guide the planning for your meeting. Depending on who in your team will be coordinating or leading the 30-day check, we created this checklist to help you set up these meetings effectively. You will need to send out the calendar invites for the 30-day check. When you do this, consider the modality of the meeting, whether in person or virtual, and ensure that there is sufficient meeting time depending on the size of the project and the amount of feedback you have collected. Ensure that you have collected feedback from the team members at least a week before the meeting date so that there is time to analyze the feedback. Make sure that there is an agenda and that any relevant data is analyzed and ready to be presented by the meeting date. Utilize the feedback tracker to help you and your project leader to determine which feedback pieces will be discussed. Based on the data and the feedback you have collected, determine if decisions will be made with the larger group or if decisions can be made in subteams and then vetted by the larger group. Once the team has determined that, invite the right people, especially those who have tested out the improvements. They are the ones that will continue to test out the new process or improvements. If you're leading a 30-day check, here are some key things that you should do during the meeting. Ensure you share the agenda of what the team needs to accomplish in the allotted time. Set the norms of the meeting, such as new feedback will be discussed at the next check. Actively facilitate each agenda item so that you can keep the agenda on track and ensure the right conversations are taking place. Ideally, update the standard work with any changes in real time with the group. If it is not that possible, take notes in a way that all can see the decision being made. Once the changes have been made to the standard work, repeat the implementation planning steps to roll out and implement the changes. After a 30-day check, you need to show the team that you are dedicated to the follow-through and hold yourself accountable to the changes being made. Here are some examples of how you can communicate changes to the standard work coming out of the 30-day check. If the changes to a standard work are simple, printing the new standard work documents with the changes highlighted would be sufficient. And if you are eliminating steps, you can strike them out instead of deleting them so the team can see the changes. If the work is more complex or there are multiple changes, a summary document can be helpful to communicate the changes to the broader team. So once the team has gone through the 30-day check and the project has reached stability, the team may be ready to close out a project. But before the team does that, it is important to confirm the fulfillment of the project scope. To help the team do that, here are some questions the team should answer. Did we meet the goals of the project? Are stakeholders satisfied with the end result? Did we deliver in a timely manner? Was it worth the cost? Did we do a good job anticipating and mitigating risk? Where and with whom should we share the spin story? And lastly, have we put in systems in place to ensure ongoing stability, such as metrics, huddles, and meetings? At your final team meeting, document your lessons learned. What did the team do well? What needs to be done better or differently? What unexpected risks did we have to deal with? How does our process need to change to meet our goals in the future? You can apply those lessons learned to optimize the approach or processes for future projects. That concludes the steps for Phase 4. Before you wrap up this phase, it is important that you and your team have completed the deliverables for Phase 4. Review each of the deliverables and ensure you've completed them in a timely manner. Here's a suggested timeline for completing Phase 4 and its deliverables. The work for Phase 4 should not take more than 4 to 5 weeks to complete. During Week 1, the team should watch the Phase 4 video, create an observation checklist, plan observations, and start collecting feedback. During Week 2, the team should continue doing observations, obtain and organize feedback, and start collecting data. In Week 3, the team should finish up doing observations, collect feedback and data, and start analyzing them in preparation for the 30-day check meeting. In the fourth week, the team should conduct the 30-day check meeting and communicate any updates that come out of the meeting to the broader team, as well as conduct any training to the frontline team on any modified standard work or workflows. If the team's timeline plan doesn't fall into the approximate 4 to 5 weeks, please come to OA office hours and discuss it with your Tier 2 leaders. This completes the walkthrough of the 4 phases of the Specialty Patient In-Basket Needs project. Thank you for watching the Phase 4 video. If you have any questions, please reach out to the Organizational Advancement team for additional support.